2, 1. And we are live. Welcome back. This is another LinkedIn live session we're doing today, and very excited because today I have Eric on the show. Eric from Crayon. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm well, Tom. It is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for making the time your afternoon, my morning, to have me on the LinkedIn live show.
Yeah, it's really fun because we've spoke to Crayon before, and what you're doing is awesome to see, and how you're changing the kind of ideas and what we'll be talking about today for the audience joining us, looking at competitive intelligence and looking around certain practices that we can do, and how to look at all these kind of changing landscapes, because it's pretty crazy at the moment. Do you not think, Eric, with everything that's happening with technologies, how quick the pace of innovation? I always think, can we keep up?
I couldn't agree with you more. You know, when you're on LinkedIn, you often see all of these news about companies, whether mergers or acquisitions, or unfortunately layoffs. And all of that stuff is competitive intelligence. But unfortunately, you have to have 10, 15, 20 different tabs open in your browser to keep track of it all. So, you know, the speed of business is enormously fast. And, you know, we try to keep people on the cutting edge and try to keep them plugged into all of what is happening.
Yeah. And I'd love to know, Eric, and to share with the audience as well. We're having a great conversation before for everyone watching, and we're getting really passionate about different sports and about Boston and about where things are. But I'd love for you to share with them, like, where your passion for what you're involved in at the moment came from, and how did you get into this area? It's what I'm always intrigued by, because at the moment, it seems that there's certain roadblock, or I don't know if it's true or not, but certain roadblocks to get into passive data or AI or things that more and more companies are dealing with. So I always love to ask the question, how did you get involved in it? What was your story?
I'll be honest with you. I was a Crayon customer about 8 or 9 years ago. So my company that I was at before, I was working in the advertising technology space, product marketer there. We had bought Crayon to keep an eye on our competition. And it was really fascinating to sort of see a stream of information that was coming in from our competitors' digital footprints. And see things that, you know, I would have had to have done a Google search to find. I would have actually actively had to seek it out in order to identify. And suddenly you start to see something and you double click on it. You start to identify, hey, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our bottom line? I would surface it up to the CEO or to the head of biz dev, and you know, suddenly they're exposed to a piece of information that they needed to do their own Google search for, and these guys are entirely too busy to do anything about it. And you know, flash forward a couple of years later, I'm here at Crayon, and I'm realizing a lot of those same things that I saw as a Crayon user are a reality in the space. Competitive intelligence professionals, many of them product marketers, are identifying pieces of competitive intelligence, specific and verifiable pieces of information, and then surfacing it to their various team members and say, hey, we can do something with this. We can activate this competitive intel and use it to our advantage. Because at the end of the day, it's publicly available. You know, it is completely ethically sourced. But, you know, connect the right dots and read the right tea leaves. Suddenly you've got an actionable competitive intelligence plan that can really drive growth.
Yeah, I love it. And the key thing that I like about what you're doing is you've got a free competitive tool, right? So a competitive intelligence tool that you can, and I think that's the best form of marketing. When I was in marketing, I always thought if you can give some sort of tool away or some sort of gift or something along those lines to basically try and help without charging, I think that's brilliant. And it's awesome to see you doing that.
It's really important because I think a lot of companies think that they're doing competitive intelligence already, or many of them have it siloed in various departments. Perfect example of this is a lot of marketing teams have invested in social media monitoring software. And in their mind, they're doing competitive intelligence. They're keeping an eye on the Twitter feeds and the LinkedIn posts, things of that nature. That's one part of competitive intelligence. That's certainly not the whole thing. So when people do take our free competitive landscape report, which is available on our website, crayon.co, you know, they get a little bit more inch deep, mile wide with what is out there in terms of competitive intelligence. It goes far beyond some of the other more siloed, more point solutions that they may be engaging in. And they suddenly realize, oh, wow, there's a ton more stuff out there that I could potentially have access to and potentially utilize in order to really make my program sing.
Yeah, that's such a good point as well, because we're having a great conversation on another live yesterday with Products Up. And I'd love to get what you think about it, Eric, and competitive intelligence, right? How it's changing with all the new channels that are coming about. So all the new social media channels, and if you want to look at it, the metaverse. And I was kind of having my mind blown. we were kind of brainstorming all the possibilities of it. But I'd love to know from your angle, how do you see that landscape with, like, look at the explosion of TikTok. I use it as a regular example. That's where brands are advertising, and it's where companies need to be competitive, either from a B2C side or a B2B side. How are you, or how are you seeing it from the landscape changing with competitive intelligence, with all these new possible channels that just keep popping up? Some are successful, some aren't. How do you see it?
Personally, I think there is two different sides of social media, and a lot of people who are just, hanging out on their phones after hours don't realize there's sort of a personal social media side, sort of the TikTok, the Instagrams, the Twitters, the Facebooks, Metas of the world. And then there's sort of like business social media. So that's your Glassdoors, your G2, your Trustpilots, right? That is where you are able to share your opinion, your thought, your free-flowing ideas around the quality of a product or a company that you work for. And I think when you get into the business social media, quote unquote, the sort of the review sites and the places by which you can talk a little bit more focused on a product or on a company, that's when you really find some interesting nuggets of information. I'll give you a perfect example. A lot of our customers, they work within the very competitive spaces, and their recruitment team is using our software to monitor Glassdoor reviews. In this time of shifting sands of business, but also the shifting talent marketplace, they want to be able to identify really high quality engineers, for example, product managers, finance folks, account executives. And the best ways for them to do that is sort of monitor aspirational companies' Glassdoor reviews, because if those reviews are coming through negative, suddenly there's a groundswell of, the reverse of support, sort of a negative sentiment. Suddenly a recruiter may think, hey, there's blood in the water here. I can start tapping up some of these folks that I've been monitoring and tracking on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I noticed that there may be an era of bad feelings happening. So, that's a little bit less monitoring the sort of like, hey, look at me, I'm on TikTok. It's a little bit more of the people who are being anonymous, but still forthright in some of these review sites. Same thing goes for product review sites, the Trustpilots, the Capterras, the G2s, where people are being somewhat honest about their relationship and their usage of a particular software suite. So when you talk about social media, Tom, I not only think about what a company is outwardly portraying either in their advertising or their social profiles, because that's really been very well cleaned up and tidied. It's been through the brand team. And I think about sort of the business social media, which is human people, sometimes behind an anonymous, a little egg. But they are being honest about what it is that's happening either inside their company or their usage of a software suite.
Yeah, that's such a great answer, because it's this honesty and trust is always what it comes down to me. For me, I think I'm not going to try. I don't care how good your product is. If I can't trust you, I'm not coming to buy from you. I'm not coming to use you.
Absolutely. No question.
Exactly. And it's such a crazy world to think, how do we keep that on? And I relate to this. So looking at what you're doing with Crayon and the competitive intelligence talk that we're having today, for example, with LinkedIn, we're huge on LinkedIn, in my opinion, and we're growing, but I'm looking at that all the time and thinking, well, how can I have that intelligence to know what I'm doing against the competition or how we're doing it? But if you look at it from like an e-commerce channel, if you look at it from how important businesses rely on social media, I'd love to know what your take is, Eric. How or why do some companies take so long to have some sort of strategy in place to do competitive intelligence, or maybe have that roadmap to properly look at what they're doing, and is it useful, if that's framed correctly?
I think things are evolving. I think that there were times, or there was a time where departments were so siloed that they were unwilling to sort of let people into a common area, a watering hole by which they can all participate. So say, for example, back in the day, a software company like Atlassian would only sell their suite of products, Jira, into a product and engineering org. And then very rarely would you have somebody outside of that organization have access to that walled garden, that tool that you've purchased the rights to. Same thing goes for a Salesforce in your CRM or HubSpot. I think more and more you're seeing more and more people outside of those departments get login names and passwords, feel like they have agency within those software suites. Suddenly, the lines between product and engineering or business operations, sales, customer success are blurring a little bit, because as the companies become more collaborative, and particularly in, this work from home environment where, in order to stay connected, it's more than just Slack and the occasional Zoom call. You do need to be within the software solutions that your other tangential or parallel departments are working within. I think competitive intelligence is very much a similar thing where, as I mentioned earlier, if your marketing team is monitoring social trends and your mergers and acquisitions teams are monitoring SEC filings and, S1s, patent applications, that type of stuff, and your product and engineering teams are monitoring, specifically your product management team is monitoring, the competitor's website to see about what it is they're developing and, new blog posts and press releases about features. If you can sort of unify that underneath one software umbrella, or really one team, a competitive intelligence team, and tie all these strands together, it's going to be not dissimilar to suddenly, you and your team having access to a tool that, a different team within your organization had always had access to. Suddenly you always feel like a player, and it creates a much more a great deal of camaraderie, a culture of competitive intelligence that affects the entire company, as opposed to it being siloed into individual groups within the organization.
Yeah. And I always think it's massively changed since the pandemic, right? And I always say if I could go back and change the pandemic, I would. But if anything, we've taken the lessons from it. And I do notice that a lot of companies, and I'd love to know what you think as well, Eric, talking around siloed and making sure that information is shareable across the business, it's become much more. It's almost proven to me that companies that were saying they can't do it have figured out they can do it. It's like you've taken that leap of faith. It's like going from, I don't know what the analogy would be, but they've enabled themselves to do it when they were saying we can't do it, or they were making excuses. As soon as the pandemic hit and everyone was ordered to work from home, they did it. And I always think, how did you get over that hump without thinking? Because when things are not siloed anymore, things are better, right?
I do not want my words to be misinterpreted here. The pandemic has been terrible. We've been living through 2.5 years of hell all over the world. Yeah. But what I can tell you, in the collaboration software space, so whether that be project management type of software, the Airtables, the ClickUps of the world, whether it be the virtual whiteboard softwares, the Miros, the Murals, whether it be the sales enablement softwares, the Showpads, the Seismics, the HighSpots, anything that can provide a central repository for your entire team, distributed or otherwise, to connect and find a common place to interact, has seen massive growth over these past 2.5 years. And the competitive intelligence software space, Crayon included, is also a party to that growth. There are a couple of players in our area, and each of us has seen pretty sizable, increases in client base and in revenue, because I think companies all over the world are waking up to the idea that, they can create this, as I mentioned earlier, culture of competitive intelligence far easier when you have a central repository for this stuff and the ability to sort of tap into the pockets of intelligence that exists within all of your employees. Because the thing is, Tom, how many team members do you have at the AI Journal? I'm guessing anywhere between 20 and 40. Is that about accurate?
Not at the moment, no. We're 8 people, but we have outsourced to contractors, and we do various different things. But 8 people that are in there.
Every single one of those people is having conversations with their constituents, right? Every single one of them. They're having, a random aside before the start of a LinkedIn Live, or they're having a LinkedIn conversation using Messenger, or they've even bumped into somebody on the street who they know is working within a particular industry. They may let slip with a piece of information that isn't available on the internet someplace. And that can be trafficked up into your organization. That's really what we call field intelligence. And the more that you start to get the entire company bought in, the more that you start to get your entire company feeling like they themselves are also a competitive intelligence professional, perhaps a junior CI professional, but a CI pro just the same, suddenly they start to traffic in this knowledge, and they start to sort of bubble these things up to the top. So that's what I think we're seeing, this shift as a result of the pandemic, is far greater collaboration across teams, just purely as a result of the fact that not everybody is in the same office building as they once were.
Yeah, I think it's great that you can work with people across the world, like we work with people across the world, and seeing companies makes you more efficient, makes you challenge the business more as well, not to go off on what we're doing, but really challenge, did you have the right view for that culture, or did you have the right mindset? Did you have the right person? And I think it's so important to get people that aren't going to have arguments with each other, but disagree with each other. And I think I think it's in the book Creativity, which is about how Pixar got created. They would purposely do these things called, what are they called, like mind trees or something, or I forgot what they're called. And they basically throw them all into different groups. They'd have someone from HR, with accounting, with marketing, with sales, and they would just go at it, just like this idea, like they would hammer ideas at each other. And you think, well, that comes up with the awesome ideas, right?
Well, I mean, Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote about this with the presidency and the cabinet of Abraham Lincoln. You know, the whole book she wrote about this called A Team of Rivals. It's literally people who were on opposite sides of the battlefield with one another, but coming together, and that difference of opinion helped create this notion of growth. You know, sometimes you need, different disparate voices coming together to sort of solve problems. And I think you've touched upon that exactly with the Pixar example. And I went back a little bit further in history to, the 1860s, but I think you certainly see where I'm going with this, is that sometimes you need a multitude of voices in different departments contributing to the overall pool of information in order to find the right pieces of intel that are going to work and that are going to help, help drive scale and growth.
Yeah. And I think to your point as well, it gives you that competitive advantage because it makes you think, well, we know something that they don't, or we know something that's going to bolster the team or pull it through. And I'd love to ask you as well, Eric. So it sounds like have you got any other good book recommendations? I made a note of that one. It's a really great one. And it's for me personally, not for the audience, but I'm always, I'm a big reader, and I always think wherever I can get the information for these things, I always want to read them. So have you got like a favorite, or maybe phrase to that question, is there a book that you've got as a favorite that really made you think about what you're doing? Or
yeah, well, look, I'm a product marketer, so I would be remiss if I didn't recommend Obviously Awesome, which is a book that's all about competitive positioning, and it's just a fantastic book. And then I also have worked in tech startups for 10 years, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Crossing the Chasm, which is also a legendary book for startups, particularly those early stage startups that are literally trying to cross the chasm from their early adopters to their eventual, hitting that growth path in that growth stage, that hockey stick level of growth that every startup wants to achieve. So, people ask me for my book recommendations, and I always give my favorite two, which is really truly a product marketing book, and the big startup book. I'm also pretty well involved with an industry organization called the Product Marketing Alliance, and they literally just came out with a book in April called Misunderstood. I think product marketers in a general sense are often sort of, hey, this is a project, make product marketing do it. Or this is a different project. That sounds like something product marketing would do. I think there is, as product marketing has grown in scope and stature, Forrester, for example, back in 2007, started referring to product marketing as portfolio marketing. It is, in many ways, everything to everybody within a company. The PMA wrote a book called Misunderstood that was basically all about how a good product marketing team can sort of crystallize and retain focus on what it means to be a product marketer for their organization. So that's another reco for yourself and for the audience, particularly for product marketers who are looking to find out where their place is in this world.
Yeah, well, you're talking to the right guy, because I used to be in marketing, and I'm obsessed with Seth Godin's. Like, I don't know all his books, but one of them, like Tribes, I really got behind that. And I mean, it's really how to, and that again gives you competitive intelligence, right? Because you get people, you get a bigger feedback loop, and you get a better understanding. But I really, I rate him. But I've made a note of all those books, so to everyone else as well, I hope you going and getting those, because I love to read. It's one of my favorite things. And taking it back to what we were talking about, then, would you have any recommendations, Eric, around how can people get started with their competitive intelligence strategy? Obviously, you've got a free tool on Crayon, which I'd recommend people to go check out and obviously get in contact. But is there something they're taking that initial step that if they need to think out as a business, because it's a two-way relationship, is there anything you would be suggesting as that initial step? And whether they're a big company or an SME, however you want to frame the question, what would you be thinking? What would you be suggesting?
So I think there are still some companies out there that either believe, A, they don't have any competitors at all. We are a unicorn in the space. Our competitors are way far behind us in the rear view mirror, and they need not worry about the competition. I'm sorry, Tom, say it again.
I was just going to say, I heard that yesterday. Someone was saying, we're completely in your own space, but yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Okay, sure. And then the other kind of company is someone who believes they're doing competitive intelligence, but perhaps they're doing so in a much more sort of human-driven, hands-on keyboard, 10 different people trying to do it, or they've outsourced it to an analyst or a consulting firm. And I feel like if you're an industrious product marketer or you're a chief strategy officer and you want to spin up competitive intelligence as a discipline, you sort of have to make a business case. You sort of have to go to your CRM team, your business operations team, and say, how many clients deals are we losing to a named competitor? Do we know that we're losing to a named competitor? Do we have that level of data hygiene? And then what piece of information can we gather on the internet or from the field that could potentially be the linchpin for us to be able to create a competitive strategy? I use the term a lot, competitive posture. How you are standing in the marketplace in order to be able to either defend yourself or be proactive in your quote unquote attacks. And that doesn't necessarily mean from a sales and customer success perspective, win and retaining business. That means from a product perspective. Is our product roadmap that is now extending out a year, maybe more, is that differentiated enough? Is that going to allow for us to have those big splash moments in Q3, early Q4 in order to drive us through to the end of the year? And that's just in the SaaS space, let alone every other space on the planet where you do need to have some forward momentum. And then, of course, the mergers and acquisition space. News broke yesterday that Apple is now in talks to buy EA, and Broadcom is in talks to buy VMware. Like, these big M&As, billions of dollars, are happening on a pretty regular basis. Wouldn't you want to be on the cutting edge and try to find and identify that company that you could add to your portfolio that's going to make your stock price, skyrocket, go through the roof? So at the end of the day, the answer to your question, Tom, is that to get off the sidelines, to sort of start, is sort of identifying the need. Who is our competition? Are they an existential threat to our company? And then two, is there information that we could gather just in a very rudimentary way on our own to sort of start to cobble this together and figure out that there are ways for us to improve our competitive posture? Once you sort of determine those two things, then you can start to programatize it. Then you can start to add team members. Then you can add software like ours to help facilitate that and really make your strategy into something that is software backed, enormously powerful, and driven by AI and machine learning to make it even easier for your actual practitioners to make this intelligence actionable and ability for the rest of the organization to activate it.
Yeah. And I'd like to delve into that a bit more then, because we talked about honestly, the M&A happen all the time, and there's some big ones that happen. And I don't always agree with them going ahead, because I just think from a competitive standpoint, they shouldn't be allowed. But like the Fitbit one is a clear example. I just knew exactly what they were going to be doing with it and what applications. And as soon as they bought them, they made all these rollouts. But looking at it from, if I flip the script with you then, Eric, when you're trying to scale a company, and you mentioned it, and we did touch on it, but I just want to delve a little bit deeper. When you're using a software like Crayon, or when people are thinking about this, how can it help companies scale? Because not only what's got me intrigued is it's not just all competitive, looking at how we're one up, but also looking at it from who can we buy, or who can we onboard, or maybe who do we need to go partner with as a technology partner? How does this work when we look at it from scaling? If you can delve into that, Eric.
Well, let me bring it back down to a tactical level. When a company is looking to make a sizable shift, whether it be a merger or acquisition, or really, veering outside of their lane into a new product area, the first team to know is almost always the executive leadership team. That the whole idea is usually germinated from within your product team, or perhaps within your sales team, saying, "Hey, we need to compete better. Can we investigate this?" The second or third team in the organization to know is your content marketing team. And the biggest reason why is because SEO is so valuable to marketing teams that you have to lay the groundwork prior to this big press release, this big announcement about this big shift. You have to have been talking about this, whether it be via executive interviews, or whether it be your own blog, talking about where that shift might be in sort of general terms, right? A good competitive intelligence professional should be able to monitor those things, sort of see, hey, they're suddenly talking about something that's outside of their lane. Suddenly they're discussing something that wouldn't necessarily be a topic of conversation for that blog or for that executive. What does that mean for us? What does that intonate to us as a company? I mean, Apple is a great example. The worst kept secret in Silicon Valley is the fact that Apple was building a car. The worst kept secret. And the reason why it's a terribly kept secret is because they've been talking about it. And they've been hiring people from Uber and from a wide variety of companies to do this type of artificial intelligence and creating vehicles. And they've outsourced some stuff to the Hyundai factories in Korea. There is an enormous amount of stuff that exists out there, and that's why it's a terribly kept secret. But not every company is Apple. Not every company has this giant industry built around Mac rumors. Other companies don't have that. So if you can have a competitive intelligence team that can monitor the content output for your competition, you can start to read the tea leaves and say, I wonder if they're going to go out and buy XYZ. I wonder if they're going to build a product that does this. I wonder if they're going to veer outside of their lane because of the fact that they're starting to drop little hints in order to lay the SEO groundwork for that eventual big announcement. And now that we have figured this out or think we figured it out, what can we do about it? Can we swoop in and buy a similar company? Can we develop a product relatively quickly or start to lay the groundwork for it? So I think we see that quite frequently, particularly amongst our client base. But I think you see it a little bit in the broader market space as well, where there's active jockeying for position when it comes to buying and selling, as well as product and new feature development, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's made me think around companies like Apple, for example, and I go into competitive views, competitive intelligence. I always think, like, this is a personal opinion, not related to anything, but I always think that they are lacking that innovation. And you see a lot of things come out like Google Glasses or whatever they are. I mean, I've got a pair of Google Glasses somewhere that we tried out for the commercial use, which are really awesome to see what they're building, and they're partnering with like Wendy's and all these different cool companies. But I always think like that is a bad kept secret. Like, you're like, are they going to bring it out? Of course they're going to bring it out. Like, it's the next step. It's going to be the next iWatch, and eventually you won't even need a bloody phone. Like, it's just that's going to be your world. Like, for a headset, I can see it, and it's going to track everything. And I just think it's an awful kept secret. I can see it in 5 years. I'll be sat at you in a cafe in Boston. I can just see it, Eric. And it takes me to that point. But when Steve Jobs was in charge, you never knew what the hell he was going to bring out. Like, you had no clue what he was going to step on stage and announce. And now you see it not just with Apple, but loads of companies. It's very predictive. And then you get some sort of master company come along and they're just like, boom, we've released this whole new software and no one knows about it. And that, I think, I don't know if you agree, is very high competitive intelligence, because it's like, that really is. You might be our competitors, but you have no idea what we're going to, and that puts people on their toes, because you're thinking, what are they going to bring in next? Like, you really don't know. I think
I think it's, again, not to stay on Apple, but, they made a pretty sizable pivot about 4 to 5 years ago towards services. They said, you can keep coming out with as many products as you want, but, I'm only going to buy an iPhone once every 2, maybe 3 years, right? If I take care of my AirPods, I'm not going to have to replace them for another 4 or 5 years. And my computer can last for 5 to 7, depending on, if you're running, Photoshop and stuff and, loading up the memory. So they realized that they needed to have a sustainable business model. And then, 6 years ago, they roll out Apple Music, a subscription service. 3 years ago, they roll out Apple TV Plus, a subscription over-the-top TV service. And suddenly industry analysts are like, oh, they're trying to get into the Amazon game. Amazon Prime, everybody has it, right? $100 whatever dollars, a couple £100 per month. Per year, to get free 2-day shipping. And half of the stuff that I buy, it's not a Prime eligible, but it's free shipping, but it gets here in 6 days. Like, what's the point? But it is a recurring services level business model that, the whole bundling nature of what Apple has done, people could have anticipated as a result of the nuggets that were being laid, the announcements that were being made, and the discussions that were being had on the open internet. And again, to bring this back around to companies who aren't competing with Apple, because there's plenty of those, you sort of have to pay attention to the other nuggets of information that are happening all over the internet, and even what your sales and customer success teams are experiencing. And they're bubbling that stuff up, as I mentioned earlier, with field intelligence. Not everybody is going to be so obvious, like, the FANG companies, the Facebook and Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. There's going to be a lot of your competitors are going to be a little bit more quiet, and that's why you need a dedicated team or a software solution that helps surface that information, because not everything is going to be reported on breathlessly by The Verge or Forbes, you know?
Yeah, it's a great point. And I always find the FANG analogy funny, because I always think, where's Microsoft? Like, they were the ones that pioneered cloud, in my opinion. Like, they were the ones that really, when Satya Nadella came in. But that's a separate point as well. And I feel like
they have stayed pretty well under the radar. You know, I will tell you, Microsoft has got a pretty compelling Google-esque product in SharePoint, right? Like, if you're not a big fan of Google Slides, you can, you know, work on PowerPoint in the cloud, and it's pretty good, particularly if you're a PowerPoint fan. You know, they don't make a big deal out of it, but, you know, Microsoft's still extremely powerful company, in talks to buy TikTok 3 or 4 years ago. And, you know, now just recently, you know, invested in Blizzard Activision. So, you know, I agree. You say a FANG and people are like, yeah, but where's the M? Because Microsoft forgot about Microsoft, like forgot about Dre, the Eminem song. You know, I can't forget about Satya, because he's got a lot of good stuff going on, you know.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to delve a bit more into it then. So looking at how companies do this and how Crayon does it specifically, so how you can use these insights, how just make it clear to me, how does this process work with Crayon? Then, if you can talk around what you're doing and what the features and functionalities are, and what's that kind of process, I guess, because you must be using data from angles and just whatever you can or can't talk about. I'm not trying to get information that I can't share publicly, but I'm just trying to think, what's that process of companies seeing it from start to finish, if that makes sense, Harry.
Well, let me distill it down. Another good book to read is Solutions-Based Selling. So I'm going to sell you on the pain first and then the solution. The average competitive intelligence professional, if they don't have a software solution that allows for them to do this at scale, they have Google Chrome, for example, and they have one tab for each of their competitors' websites open. So let's say they have 5 major existential threat competitors. So there's 5 different tabs open. And then they have to keep 5 tabs open of each of those competitors' Twitter feeds. And then they have to have another 5 tabs for their Glassdoor pages, for their G2 reviews, and then so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. And suddenly you have a Google Chrome browser window open with 60, 70 different tabs, right? You're trying to monitor 5 competitors' digital footprints, which includes their website. And you have to multiply that by every individual piece or location source of information that can exist. Now, in your mind, you're probably the kind of guy, Tom, that keeps a very tidy Google Chrome window and only 3 tabs open at a time. I have to remain focused. But a lot of us, I'm looking at my other screen right now, and there's 20, 30 tabs open, only identifiable by an icon. I can't even see the text, right? So you can visualize this, how challenging this can be for a product marketer who's got a ton of other stuff going on, or a competitive intelligence professional who's got 60 different tabs open, and it becomes impossible. You basically have to look at it every single day, hit the refresh button. Hey, what's changed on my competitor's website? What's the news? What's the skinny? What are they talking about on Twitter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what our software tries to do is take all of the different changes that can happen within all 60 plus of these tabs, sources of information about individual competitors, and put them into a location, a style that most people have grown accustomed to, which is ostensibly a news feed. So what comes through in your window is essentially a feed, continuously and sustainable growing feed of information about all of your competitors from hundreds of sources all over the internet. It goes into your feed. Now, this is the AI journal. So here's where the AI comes in. Not every piece of information within your feed is useful to you. Not everything is going to be relevant to you. In the same way, your Facebook feed is often dominated by wedding or engagement announcements and baby showers and your friends' children being born. Those are all extremely relevant life events that you probably have to buy a gift for. And then the other stuff is sort of downplayed or not talked about as much within your newsfeed. The same thing goes for Crayon's AI. We want to make sure that we are surfacing the information that is most relevant to you so you can act on it. So in an answer to your question, Tom, how does this actually work? Well, it's basically taking what would be 60 up to 70, even more Chrome tabs for different sources of information, including your competitors' websites, and condensing it down into a newsfeed that allows for you to more programmatically attack your competitive intelligence efforts. And crucially, each one of those insights can be shared to your teams. Hey, this is relevant. Hey, you should take a look at this. This is immediate. This is actionable right now in the moment.
Yeah.
Or you can compile those insights into either, a number of different deliverables, battle cards, newsletters, dashboards for your teams to look at, where you can literally connect with a straight line multiple different insights and say, hey, this is why this is relevant to us. Here's a key takeaway that helps answer the question, what does this actually mean? Because a lot of insights simply don't have that. They're just, hey, it's a link to an article. And so much of what our teams need to do is provide that level of context, nuance, interpretation as to what it means for your company in particular. So, Tom, I hope that answers your question. But really, at the end of the day, it improves efficiency, it improves capability, makes team members that much more capable to do what it is what they do. And if teams are empowered with quality competitive intelligence, we've seen win rates or competition win rates against competition grow. We've seen better product differentiation. We've seen marketing teams just get thrilled with the notion that they can now pivot and position against their competition that much easier because they can sort of read the tea leaves and know where they're going. And of course, executive leadership loves to have those nuggets of knowledge before they start kite surfing with their brother CEOs, so they can engage in conversation about what it is that's happening within the broader market.
Yeah, and I'd love to know from that, Eric, is there, from your experience with Crayon and over the years, you obviously have got a lot of angles of seeing the success from it. Are there any that and you've obviously got a library in your head, but is there any from any company or any generic industry, keep it generic, any kind of application that you've seen from competitive intelligence where you thought, that's a really fascinating one, we've never seen that before, or something that you really saw like, we didn't brainstorm that in the team meeting, or that's an innovative or an interesting way of getting a benefit out of it? Has there been any situation like that?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Most people, and I talked earlier about this notion of defense and proactive offense, right?
Yeah.
I had a conversation a couple of months back with a competitive intelligence professional at a major financial services provider. This is on our website. It's MasterCard. So I'm sure you're familiar with that in the UK, and global company. And he said, look, I use a lot of our competitive intelligence efforts to do what we call wargaming. We get together, sometimes once every half year, sometimes once a quarter, depending on the competitive pressure. And we have entire teams sort of put on the hat of their competition. They basically impersonate what it is their competitors could and would do in certain situations based on the competitive intelligence, the dossier that they have compiled about their general reaction to things, how they move within the market, how they price, how they package, how they position, any number of different things. So you talk about an interesting application. A lot of times, competitive intelligence can be very much in the moment. Here's a battle card to help my sales team sell against the competition in a prospective deal. This is a situation where it's incredibly strategic. It's literally a 1 to 2 day session where it's almost like the mock United Nations, where a group of students are impersonating a country and they're talking about how they would deal with geopolitical issues. This is a major financial services company that is using competitive intelligence to sort of mock deal with a crisis, or mock deal with an incursion or an aggressive merger or acquisition, or a sizable shift in the product or in the financial landscape, how they would deal with it from a competitor by competitor basis, to help them improve their own internal defenses and how they would react were a situation like that to happen. So to me, I heard him, his name is Michael. I heard him tell me this story and I just was aghast. Like, that is so smart. It's so intelligent to be ready for anything. I mean, really, companies like this need to be ready for anything. And they were literally using competitive intelligence to prepare themselves for the worst or other scenarios that they needed to be on proper footing, so they weren't back on their heels, worried about what to do next.
Yeah, I think that's really good. That's a really great way of looking at it. And I don't know if we touched this earlier, but I really want to ask it. When Crayon's looking at it, Eric, from new channels becoming available, in your experience, has there been channels that have popped around that have made you and the team think this is a new way we can track intelligence, this is a new way our customers can track intelligence? Whether you want to use an e-commerce channel, or whether you want to use a new form of advertising, or you want to use a social channel, or whatever example you want to use, maybe it's a new, I don't know, like Deliveroo coming along or something. Like, I don't know any of all these channels that we use. I mean, I've got about 100 apps on my mobile phone, and you think, has there been one that's really popped up to think, this is interest? From that, we've learned a massive lesson of how we can help you track more data. Has there been a situation like that?
Well, you talk about apps on your mobile phone, every single one of the app stores, whether it be the Android App Store or the Apple App Store, has a review engine built in. Yeah. So I was mentioning earlier the sort of the G2 and Trustpilot Capterra reviews for SaaS tools. Yeah. There are a ton of companies out there that have their own mobile apps. They've literally pivoted towards the phone and tablet. So monitoring the reviews that exist within the app stores, I think, has been really powerful for a lot of companies if they're competing against rivals who have their own mobile environments. Because, hey, if they've got a mobile app, we sort of have to have a mobile app in a lot of ways. So how do we best understand what their mobile app is not providing, where we can provide it better? Yeah. So that's a great piece of information.
Yeah.
Back to the old school, Tom, I'll tell you, the competitor's website is going to tell you a lot about what's going on. There is if you're a competitive intelligence professional, it behooves you in one of those 70 tabs in your browser. Yeah. And you have to actually go through the site tree every day, every 2 days, every 3 days to see if there has been a change made to the company's website itself. We have we do a survey every year, the State of Competitive Intelligence Survey, survey upwards of 1,500 competitive intelligence professionals, and they tell us that my competitor's website seems old school, seems like an old school source or what have you, but it's arguably one of the biggest and best sources of information. And to try to identify, hey, they've made a minor change to the way they're positioning this product. I wonder what that means. Are they scaling back on their development of it? Are they making a shift where they're going to have it do more than what it was doing before? Have they had a preponderance of users kick the tires on it and say, it's not exactly the bee's knees like you made it out to be? That type of information, as it comes in, is enormously powerful for product and marketing teams to ascertain, what are these guys up to? So those are two examples of one that is, you wouldn't necessarily think of off the top of your head, the App Store reviews. But also something more old school, something more rudimentary that is enormously difficult to track, which is the competitors' websites, because most competitors' websites have 20, 30, 50 different subpages that it's impossible to track on your own. And sometimes you need a software solution that's going to help you do it.
Yeah, 100%. I always used to use, when I was back in it, I used to use Ahrefs, and that could only get me so far. And that was my world of marketing. I was an SEO and content creator at heart from the marketing manager position. But a quick side note to the audience watching, and maybe to you if you've read it, Eric, to people, I get this question sometimes personally, to people building apps, and they want to build apps. So I'd heavily recommend going to read the book Hooked by Nir Eyal, I think it is. And it is a fantastic book that completely changed. It's not to say apps aren't the way you should go. 100%, I think you should. And I love Android's model more than I love Apple's, because it's much more open source, and Apple's much more shut. But I always think that is a great book to anyone watching, and it's just always in the back of my head, because I ask the question a lot, and they think, we're going to develop this app, and I think just read that book first, and you'll get a whole traction of how it's going to go. But I also think, to your point as well, Eric, from a marketing view, seeing as we're both marketers in some respect, and I think everyone's a marketer in their own respect, but looking at it from, it reminded me of how conferences are done, right? They moved. So again, Apple were the first ones to bloody do it. They came out and everyone's doing it. Like ServiceNow did it. I was at one in The Hague, and they're a brilliant company. They were doing it. And from small companies doing it, I getting press releases, and you think it's completely shifted from everyone congregating at one, which they still do. I mean, you still got the big ones like Jitex and Dubai, and the one that happens in Vegas at the beginning of January. I forgot the name off the top of my head. But all of these ones that do come together, but it's to that same point you were saying, like it just kind of resonated with me when you said it, Eric.
There was a big tech conference in Hamburg just last week. And
yes, I heard about this, the commerce one. I heard about it yesterday, and it was like 100,000 people. Sorry, go on.
And probably 20% of the speakers appeared via a giant screen on stage. They didn't need to be in person, the tiny little speck and the distance in the hall on a stage with a little microphone headset on. You can actually make more of an impression by being like beamed in live via satellite on a giant screen, right? Like the whole notion of live events has completely shifted as a result of the pandemic. And sometimes you can make just as much of an impression by having a conversation down the barrel of a Zoom camera than you need to, right in the front of on the stage with everybody. you know.
And where do you stand, Eric? You a bigger fan of in person, or are you a bigger fan of has it swinged you since we moved much more digital, or are you
Tom,
still?
I think I'm a people person. I'm a pretty charismatic guy. I like to press the flesh every now and then. I loved being on the floor at conferences, particularly at conferences where I could speak with either current or future customers, because I'm a product marketer, and what separates product marketing from a lot of other marketing disciplines is empathy, understanding, really understanding the customer's challenges, and how, what I do for a living can sort of translate the value of my software, my product, into something that's going to solve for that challenge. So I loved it. And then COVID hit, we had a baby. Now I don't want to bring COVID home off of an airplane. So I'm a little more reticent to do those things, but there is going to come a time where I'm going to have to scratch that itch and do a little business travel and see customers in person. I'm looking forward to that day. As soon as I get a shot in this little guy's arm, then I will more than likely be back on an airplane and doing that in-person stuff. Hey, maybe you and I will run into each other and have a pint one of these
100%, man. 100%. We'll be there. We'll have a coffee or a beer, and it'll be a great way of doing it. Because I honestly think when people ask me, they're like, "Do you attend many events?" I'm like, "I'm as many as I can get to. Like, if I can get to it, I'll go to it. Like, because it's living here in Birmingham, we're very quick to get into London. So there's a lot happening for anyone watching AI Summit and CogX in the next few weeks, and then AI Tech Live the following week, and there's loads of other ones happening. But yeah, I'm always keen. I'm glad to hear you are as well, because you just can't get that. I don't know. Just to me, you can't get that same rapport with someone when you really want to have an intricate conversation, coffee, lunch, or whatever it is that you're doing to really explain how you get. Like, but look at this. Before, I was kind of sure what Crayon did. We've had a few conversations, but now I really know what the kind of passion is behind it and what you're doing. So I think that being in person and being into those conversations, I'm basically saying to everyone watching, go to a conference. from that in my long run, but no, from that I think it's a great way to learn. But I'd love to know, just on the last thing then, is there anything where can people, obviously you've got the links below, or is there anything that you've got coming that you can share, or any kind of final thoughts, Eric, of where people can find out more, or what you would leave as a recommendation, however you want to swing it? What are your final thoughts there?
So purely from a competitive intelligence perspective, we have tried to lead from the front in this space. We think of ourselves as a pioneer, the first solution to market that helps programatize the notion of doing competitive intelligence. And we believe we've built up that reputation. So if you are at all interested in competitive intelligence, subscribe to our blog. We have more than 18,000 subscribers to our blog. We post, at least twice a week, oftentimes more. And, it's not just, Crayon. It's really talking about what product marketers, what competitive intelligence professionals are talking about. It's relevant to what it is that they're doing, different takes on how you can use competitive intelligence to power things like win-loss analysis, where the KPIs are that exists within the CI space. So I would encourage people just to give us your email address, and we will email you when we got some new blog posts coming out that may or may not be relevant to you. Second thing is we come out with pretty sizable downloadable reports, a couple of times a year. Most recently, we've come out with a new version of our guide to competitive intelligence. Now, that is a very comprehensive look at not only just our take, but a broader take on competitive intelligence. Co-produced with our friends over at SCIP, the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals, largest industry organization for competitive intelligence professionals. And it's a really cool document to sort of have on your desktop, or sort of give yourself some motivation, some knowledge about what to do next. And then finally, the thing I'll offer up is more of this thought leadership end. We have our Competitive Advantage Academy, which is a free video-based learning management, or ultimately a university, and how to do competitive intelligence. So if any of your viewers, listeners, are just really interested in how do I even start doing this? How do I even start to define what competitive intelligence means? Don't just listen to the two of us in this 45-minute conversation. We've got, take you about an hour and a half, maybe less, in order to watch these videos, ascertain sort of how to do competitive intelligence in our activator course. And then coming soon, the next level, the 201 course for competitive intelligence is coming to our Competitive Advantage Academy. You can find all of this stuff at our website at crayon.co. It is, we try not to be, all poundy our chest about our software. We do not flood the market with pro Crayon stuff. It's really pro competitive intelligence. We want to be the leader in the space, and we believe that we are. And we want to be able to lead from the front and say, look, this is a discipline, even if you don't use a software solution, that enterprise companies should be engaging in order to be more successful and scale their businesses.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I always like that as well, because if you come from the education standpoint, it's so much more powerful. And I always think the companies that I see succeed the most aren't the ones that like we receive press releases all the time. Like I literally was saying to someone, we received 100 in just over 24 hours the other day. And it's just like, Christ, like getting through all those to see what to go through. But I always spot the good ones from the bad ones, because the good ones will lead with something saying the leading provider of this before even really explaining to me how they're going to help or what they're going to do or what it's going to do. And that's just a personal opinion. To me, I think I want to know what you're doing and how you're doing it and how you're going to educate our audience and how you're going to help our audience, because naturally they feel like they know you, they feel like they can trust you, and they feel like you're helping me before just taking. Yeah,
I mean, when it comes to leader, I mean, I'm not being arrogant when I say that, and I am a marketer after all. But the Product Marketing Alliance, 2 years in a row, for as long as they've done their Pulse report, has named us the leader. We have been named a leader by G2, so by user reviews. Every single time they have done a ranking and done an understanding of our competitive intelligence software space. Forrester, big industry organization, ranked us a leader over every other major solution in the market. So, I say leader, and that's not marketing speak. Yeah. Independent organizations, our end users, and others have also said the same thing. So I feel confident in saying so, not from a buzzwordy perspective, but from basis in fact, right?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, because it's always a good way to angle. And I didn't think that anyway from the conversation we've had. But yeah, awesome. Really excited about what's to come. I'm really excited about seeing you in Boston, Eric, at one of these conferences, or if you're ever over the pond, it will be good to have this conversation in person, get it all filmed up, and yeah, good to do it in person, man.
I love the UK. I've spent an inordinate amount of time there. I'd love to get back there at some point. A lot of great. I mean, it's a nation that's winter in the UK and summer in the UK are two totally different things. I mean, it's unbelievable. So looking forward to getting over there, perhaps, between May and September, as opposed to September to April,
Yeah, 100%. And when you get over here, we'll definitely get you a dinner and a beer. It'll be awesome to see you.
I love it.
And on that note, appreciate everyone for joining. If you've got any questions for Eric, you know where to reach out to him. And as always, let us know who you'd like us to bring on the show next. It's our mission, our job, to try and bring you great people such as Eric, so you can learn about all these different worlds of emerging technology, such as AI, cloud, and everything else under that umbrella. So thank you again, Eric. Really appreciate you coming on. And to everyone else, have a great rest of the week.